We stand today at a critical juncture for the health of our planet, and nowhere is this more apparent than in our oceans. Covering over 70% of the Earth's surface, our oceans produce more than half the oxygen we breathe, regulate global temperatures, and are home to over 80% of life on Earth. Yet, beneath the surface, these ecosystems are struggling against the forces of pollution, radiation, waste, illegal fishing, and ultimately the consequences of climate change. Every year, 11 metric tons of plastic enter our oceans, and by 2050, this mass could exceed the weight of all the fish in the sea, while overfishing has pushed over 1/3 of global fish stocks to collapse. Against these threats stands a man who has dedicated his entire life to protecting our oceans, Captain Paul Watson. Watson is no ordinary environmentalist. He has chosen a path of direct action, believing that when laws and diplomacy fail, intervention is the only option. He started his journey with Greenpeace, demonstrating against nuclear testing in Alaska for marine life through protests and awareness campaigns. But Watson soon realized that these methods were insufficient to stop the destruction he witnessed. He founded Sea Shepherd, an organization committed to what he calls aggressive nonviolence, direct and bold, and often bearing high risks. Sea Shepherd has since gained global recognitions for its campaigns. Their operations have included blocking illegal fishing trawlers, halting shark finning operations, and obstructing whaling vessels. His methods and those of his crew aim to sabotage the actions of those who kill these essential sentient beings, sometimes at high economic costs for the whalers or their insurance companies, and at the peril of their own lives. Sea Shepherd's actions have not only saved countless marine animals, but also brought global attention to violations of international agreements protecting endangered species and sanctuaries. Between 2005 and 2012, for instance, Sea Shepherd's campaigns in the Southern Ocean prevented whaling fleets from killing over 6,000 whales. But these bold tactics come with harsh consequences. Watson has faced international arrest warrants, been imprisoned, dealt with lawsuits, and has been accused of piracy and even eco-terrorism. Recently, Watson's situation has taken an even more alarming turn. He was arrested in Greenland based on an international arrest warrant issued by Japan. Japan accused him of injuring crew members of whaling fleets in 2010 with stink bombs, which are harmless. Although not absolving him, Danish authorities rejected his extradition. He was released on December 17, 2024. Watson's imprisonment highlights the intensifying legal challenges faced by environmental activists, where even regions with limited international political clout can enforce measures to suppress dissent. The charges brought against him raise serious questions about the misuse of international law to target environmental activists. Watson's case exposes a trend where legal frameworks are manipulated to criminalize the actions of those who threaten powerful economic interests. Industries use litigation, lobbying, and international pressure to shield themselves against those who expose their exploitation of nature. This raises an urgent moral question. Are these laws truly serving justice and the well-being of humanity? Or are they simply tools to muzzle those who dare stand up for our planet? This brings us to an important issue. How do we defend those who defend our planet? And by extension, defend us as well, because yes, our fate depends on the well-being of a healthy planet. As Paul Watson puts it, worms, bees, and whales don't need us. We need them. It is a matter of moral obligation to stand up for fighters like Captain Watson, because they are on the front line, acting on our behalf and for our futures, and they desperately need our support. But let us not forget that Paul Watson isn't alone in this fight. He is part of a growing movement of environmental defenders that, despite facing increasing risks and opposition, continue to fight for the planet's survival. Activists like the late Berta Cáceres, an indigenous leader from Honduras whose life was tragically taken in 2016 because she stood up against the construction of the Agua Zarca Dam. Berta had spent decades fighting for her community's lands and the rights of indigenous peoples, often standing in direct opposition to powerful multinational corporations who sought to exploit these natural resources for profit. Berta's fight was not just about a dam. It was about protecting the lands, the waters, and the cultures of indigenous peoples. Her assassination sparked global outrage and highlights the dangerous and sometimes deadly consequences faced by environmental activists. Rémi Fraisse, a young and dedicated environmentalist, also paid the ultimate price for his commitment. In 2014, he joined a protest against the controversial Sivens Dam project in southwestern France, which threatened the local ecosystem. His death, caused by an offensive explosion from a police grenade, shocked the nation, but his death was not in vain. Public outrage and the subsequent legal and political fallout led to the suspension of the dam project. Rémi Fraisse's memory continues to motivate those who stand up for our planet, reminding us that even in the face of violence, courage can bring about change. These are but a few examples, but the world is filled with groups and people like Paul Watson, standing up to defend our ecosystems at great personal cost. From the Amazon to the Arctic, from the deep oceans to the rainforest, these defenders are taking on some of the most powerful industries in the world. Their fight is not just about protecting nature, but also about ensuring a sustainable future for all of us. There are actions we can take to stand with fighters like Watson and others like him. First, we must demand transparency and accountability in the enforcement of international environmental laws. Governments must stop succumbing to industry pressure to suppress activism. We can support organizations that advocate for the legal rights of environmental defenders. For instance, groups like Amnesty International and Earth Rights International provide critical legal resources for activists facing persecution. Perhaps most importantly, we can push for stronger legal frameworks as well as enforcing pre-existing legislation, although little has been done in this area, as illegal activities generate lots of profit. In 2021, the United Nations declared access to a healthy environment a fundamental human right. Building on this, we need to ensure that environmental defenders are legally recognized as human rights advocates, with protections against prosecution and intimidation. Critics argue that Watson's methods are too extreme, at the limit of legality and recklessness. But history shows us that those who challenge powerful interests often face such backlash. The abolitionist movement, the civil rights movement, anti-apartheid struggles, and even women's rights were once seen as radical and even unlawful. Yet progress demands civil disobedience. When the stakes are as high for our oceans and for ourselves, drastic measures are not only justified, but necessary. Watson's work pushes us to confront ethical dilemmas. Is it acceptable to behave in what's perceived as reprehensible, to uphold a higher moral commitment to the environment? Is direct action justified if it prevents the extinction of a species, including our own? Scientists warn that if current trends continue, all fisheries could collapse and we could lose 90% of coral reefs by 2050, with catastrophic consequences for marine biodiversity. Paul Watson's story is not just about one man's fight for the oceans. It is a call to action for all of us. His life challenges us to rethink what it means to be an environmentalist today. It's no longer enough to raise awareness and to advocate for change from the sidelines. Our planet needs defenders willing to take risks and to fight for the ecosystems that sustain irreplaceable life on Earth. Governments do not like people like Watson. Let us live in a world where we don't need them anymore, make them obsolete. We must therefore take real measures to enforce the law and to preserve our ecosystem. Should we defend our defenders? Should we not stand side by side with those who are willing to risk everything for the planet's survival? As Paul Watson puts it, ships are expendable, whales are not. Let us not only admire his efforts, but take them as a challenge to act. Let us be bold, because bold action is what this moment demands. Thank you.